Now, real quickly, I'd like to go over some major tenets of social cognitive theory. Now, first, let me define a tenet. A tenet is, you can think of a tenet as a mathematical proof. Something like if you were to take a statistics class, introduction to statistics, or introduction to another type of math, maybe geometry or something, we would say, we would give you a proof, a mathematical proof, and we would say if all of these conditions are met, then the Pythagorean theorem works. We might say you need to accept certain conditions, and when those conditions are met, then you can believe this equation. Well, a tenet is the same thing. These are proofs, theoretical proofs we'll call them. And these are assumptions that you just have to buy into in order to ascribe to the social cognitive theory. So the first one that Bandura puts forth is called symbolizing capability. So he's and you can see that Bandura has heavy emphasis on the intrapersonal or individual or psychological determinants of behavior. When he brings this forth and says symbolizing capability, people are able to use symbols to attribute meaning to experience. These help in interpretation. And so you have a young kid that learns how to speak, and he does so by repeatedly associating symbols and words. So he sees a horse, and through repeated pairings learns to say horse. Well, the horse is just a symbol for the word, or vice versa. Forethought capability. Most behavior is purposive, and it's regulated by prior thoughts. Now think about your own behaviors. Did you exercise this morning? Did you exercise yesterday? Are you planning on exercising tomorrow? Do you engage in behaviors when you plan on engaging in them? Do you think about them in advance? Do you sometimes set out your shoes the night before? Certainly you've set an alarm clock before. When you do that, it's an example of, or an indication, that you are planning ahead. Bandura calls this forethought. And he says that humans are unique in our ability to enact a lot of forethought in our behavior. Vicarious capability. Now this is an interesting one, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples in just a minute. Learning that results from observing other people's behavior and the consequences for them. So Bandura was one of the first people to put forth the idea that behavior isn't just learned through our own experiences. And prior to Albert Bandura, many people thought that in order to learn something and learn it well, you had to engage in the behavior yourself. And out of that, we have a lot of terms that we use on a day-to-day basis, like the School of Hard Knocks, for example. Well, you have to learn by engaging. And that's not entirely true based on the research that Albert Bandura and many people since have conducted. We learn by observing other people, and not just observing other people, but observing the consequences that they get. So again, I'll give you an example of that in just a minute. Self-regulatory capability. People have the ability, an inherent ability, to set standards and be self-evaluative. Meaning, we can say, that's not right, I'm not going to do that, and when we engage in behavior, we're able to evaluate ourselves. Was that appropriate? Was that not appropriate? And this might be the departure from where public health actually incorporates some gospel paradigms or gospel constructs. So, of course, we all know about the light of Christ. We have this inherent ability to know between good and bad. And perhaps self-regulation is reflective of this gospel paradigm. And so each of us has this ability. Lastly, self-reflective. We're able to analyze our experiences and think about our thoughts. So for example, and to go back to forethought capability, we have the ability to think about things and to analyze whether or not that's appropriate or not. So symbolizing capability, just an example, that we associate symbols with many things. And these are just, these were once novel, meaning meaningless or otherwise just completely neutral. But they've been paired, and so we have the ability to associate symbols with them. So when we see a stop sign, we know what to do. Or sometimes we don't know what to do. Self-regulation. Of course, some of us have to self-regulate this way. Okay, now, vicarious learning. I'm going to go back to this tenet and discuss this one just a little bit. And there is some good research that, and the citations that I've listed here are early 1960s, and there's been thousands and thousands of studies since, but these were some of the original studies conducted by Bandura. And essentially what he found, and I'm going to show you this in a video in just a second, that children learn to be aggressive by observing others. And they don't just learn to be aggressive by observing others, but they also learn to be aggressive by observing others and observing the consequences that those people get. So for example, if you watch a person behave aggressively and they get what they want, then you're not just more likely to behave aggressively because they were aggressive, but also because they got what they wanted. By contrast, if you observe somebody behave aggressively and it's very punishing, and let's say, for example, they are embarrassed or they get beat up, then we're less likely to engage in that behavior, again, based on the consequence. So here's a brief video clip that describes Albert Bandura's early research.
The model pummeled the doll with the mallet, flung it in the air, kicked it repeatedly, threw it down and beat it.
So this is the model. Now this is the observer, the children. You'll first see a boy and then a girl.
It was once widely believed that seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic. Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns, even though it was never modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling. The children also picked up the novel hostile language. The room contained varied play materials, and children could choose to play aggressively or non-aggressively. The children devised new ways of hitting the doll. Now, the object of interest was the novel aggressive acts, not punching the doll. Children in the control group who had no exposure to aggressive modeling never exhibited the novel forms of aggression. Here's a creative embellishment. A doll becomes a weapon of assault.
Now, I think there are a couple of interesting things. First of all, you might just say, well, kids are inherently not aggressive, but maybe sort of aggressive. Meaning that if you just put a kid in a room with a Bobo doll like that, of course they're going to start hitting it. But why? Why would they? Think about the environment that they are exposed to. Think about the vicarious learning that is ongoing. Look at society. Is it violent? In fact, it is. Most children see several thousand occurrences of violence on television, even young children on television annually. Several thousand. So you turn on a sitcom, you turn on a movie, and it's perhaps more movies than sitcoms, but they are replete or basically compact and filled with violent occurrences and displays of violence. Well, that's vicarious learning. We're watching other people, and oftentimes it's glorified, meaning that the outcome to the person who is aggressive and violent is very good. They win. They win the boxing match. They win the war. They kill the other person, and it's celebrated. Is there any other environment that you can think of where that happens?